Welcome to the FNO InsurTech podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsurTech. We talk about how technology and innovation are affecting and driving change in the industry. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world.
That was a nice question.
Welcome. Just, you know what? Forget all the other stuff. Welcome.
Okay, welcome.
Your turn. You talk.
Welcome, everybody, to FNO InsurTech. We're happy that you're here. Normally, Rob, it's about how stupendous and wonderful and exciting. Today was just welcome. Why?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a really good reason why.
What is that?
As soon as it comes to my mind, I'm going to let you know.
Is it because I'm recording this intro at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon?
No, that's so incredibly generous of you. It really is. No, it's because our guest today defies all description and definition.
I like that, and I would agree with that.
They made one of these guys, one, and then they took the mold, they crushed it, they burned it, melted it back down, and sold it as gold bricks. That's
huge.
right.
That's like your biggest intro
big.
yet. That's big.
That's big.
Yeah,
that's big.
We have a really cool person on today. We have a person who has made a big impact in your life, and has made a big impact in mine, even though he might not know it. But he did. He set my InsurTech career on a path forward by listening and talking to me at a very early stage in my InsurTech career. We have a big guest on.
We have a big guest. We had a guy that he was one of the first people that I knew who was embracing all this stuff and trying to make it all work practically in the insurance world that exists today.
Right.
He was trying to say, you know what? We need to marry all these new ideas and these new processes and technologies to what exists. How do we do that? What belongs? What doesn't belong? What's going to make it? What isn't going to make it? What does my organization need? We have that guy on.
We do. Why don't you tell everybody who that guy is?
I'm not ready to say his name. I forget it. Well,
I mean, what do we just want to keep shouting praises among praises? And it is important to know the guy's moved on to a new venture. We're going to get to talk all about this new venture.
He's in a whole new venture. It's cloaked in secrecy, the whole thing. So a young man, giant in this field of insurance transformation,
almost
innovation.
Like Bob Vila is to the world of tools. This guy is to the world of InsurTech.
Well, that was very clever because, I'll tell you something about this guy. Mm-hmm. He could build his own house.
Yeah.
Repair his own car. He could live on an island with his family, but he could live on an island as the only people on the island, and everything would be beautiful and custom. He's incredibly talented in every way. He's the kind of person I love to hate because he's gifted in every way, right?
And an all-around super nice guy.
Wonderful man. Wonderful man. One of my favorites. We have with us today the former leader of innovation at Amica, now out on his own, has decided that he wants to take his show, the Adam Kostecki Show, on the road and share his knowledge, know-how, insights, and abilities with the whole InsurTech space. Carriers, InsurTechs, venture world, all can take advantage of the remarkable, vast amount of knowledge that he possesses.
I'm ready. Let's jump in. Let's go.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, without further ado, the one and only Adam Kostecki, the principal at InsurTech Innovations, his new company. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. Let me provide an appropriate introduction here because the usual introduction just isn't going to do today. We have the man most likely to be named the next Bob Villa.
Bob Villa, I think.
Bob Villa, yeah.
Bob Villa. If they had a national contest and they had to pick one, we have him on the show today. Adam Kostecki.
Welcome, Adam. Welcome.
The Adam Kostecki, who's formerly known as Adam Kostecki of Amica.
Right.
Formerly. And now known as Adam Kostecki of InsurTech Innovations.
LLC.
There you go.
Okay. Well, we're just going to call it Inc. so that we can call I want to call it Triple I.
Well, you could.
That one's taken, Rob. Good try, but I think that one's taken.
That one might be gone already.
But no, yeah, I've just recently started my own InsurTech focused consulting advisory service.
Wow, how great.
Yeah, trying to leverage the 20 some odd years experience I had on the carrier side, working with vendors and technology providers, especially startups, helping them achieve breakthrough success in the insurance industry.
Wow, that was really good.
That was good.
I practiced that all night.
You've been working on that.
All right, yeah, perfect.
We're done here today. Thanks for being our guest.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great.
So for those of you who don't have the video feed that we do, we're looking at Adam.
None of them do.
In this pool house.
It is.
Yeah, it looks like a cabin.
It looks like a cabin. You might call it a pool house. Maybe some people might call it a shed. But yeah, this was...
That's not a shed.
It was at one time.
Okay, but for anybody out there who's thinking, oh, shed, don't think shed. Stop.
It's a he shed.
Back at the beginning of COVID, we were doing some work on the house, and this was the time we really shifted to work from home. And unfortunately, I had demolished my home office, and I made it through about 1 or 2 days trying to work from my living room with 2 young kids running around the house, and said, I got to figure out a different solution.
Oh, yeah.
So I took a little bit of time off during the summer and really fully remodeled this pool house here, put all the pool equipment outside, put up all the wood paneling you see here, and did a nice wood beadboard ceiling, built a couple lofts for the kids. Don't tell my insurance company that, but no, it's a great, quiet place to work from home. I really enjoy it out here.
As long as the lofts are unoccupied.
Exactly. There's storage lofts. That's what we would say on the underwriting application.
That's right.
It's wonderful to have you back. This is your second go around, right? You've been with us twice. This is number 2.
Maybe about 3 years ago, the last time we connected on the podcast.
Our producer just let me know that it was 6/28/19, 3.5 years. Wow.
A lot has changed since then.
We're old, man. We've been doing this for a long time.
I know. Rob, I was looking at the graphic of your image, and I said, on this podcast cover, I think they might have to retouch your image.
Adam and I had a pre-call for this episode, and we did it on video. And the first thing out of his mouth, he takes one look at me and says, geez, you're old. You got old.
I don't think I said that. I said, Rob, you look good in the salt and pepper.
No, that's not. No, that's
if the shoe fits,
you went straight to old, because old people remember when they're called old by people who aren't old. Or actually, old people don't remember much.
I would have said experience. Rob, you look so much more experienced than the last time I talked to you.
So wise.
It's true that I am more experienced, just in no way that's functional. So or practical. Let's talk about where we are today. So Adam Kostecki, the principal, is that your title? Principal?
Sure. Yeah. Principal consultant.
Okay. Principal consultant at InsurTech Innovations. And I want to talk all about InsurTech Innovations, all about that, and even on some special topics of interest. But first, I want to talk about your resume. Give us a minute on where you started in this journey with InsurTech and insurance and how you got to today.
I probably took a non-traditional path here. I mean, I think the story starts before my days at Amica, my carrier days. I think I told you before, as you can see, I really enjoy working around the house, working with my hands, building stuff. Prior to working at Amica, I was an auto mechanic. I love cars. I love working on cars. I do my own maintenance on cars. and just the love of cars and homes ended up as kind of a interesting set of experience to roll into insurance, personal lines, obviously, insurance. And, working as a mechanic, I worked at a small independent shop with a couple bays, doing everything from oil changes to engine swaps back in the 90s, the early 90s. And I was kind of convinced. I went to college, got a business management degree from Stonehill, but I was kind of convinced I was just going to take over that shop and, continue being an auto mechanic. One day I was on campus and I had some time, a couple classes got canceled. I went to the career resources department and they were like, "Do you have a resume?" I said, "No." "Do I, should I have one?" And they said, "Well, you're spending a lot of money on college. You might want to think about it."
Might be a good idea.
Yeah. I said, geez. And so I'm sitting with my career counselor and, she started talking, "What do you like to do?" And I said, in the summer times, I'm in construction, I paint houses. And in the wintertime or, when I'm at school, I work on cars. And she's trying to formulate this into a resume that's applicable to, accountants and, sales and other things. And, as she's thinking, it was like a light bulb went off in her head. And she said, there's a company that's going to be doing some on-campus interviewing, Amica. And I said, "Wow, Amica, I've never heard of them before." And she said, "Yeah, they're an insurance company, and you'll be driving around looking at damaged cars and damaged houses all day." And I said, "Boy, that could be an interesting use of my experience." And really, that's how it all got started. I started at Amica as a frontlines adjuster, handling both auto bodily injury claims and homeowner property claims. I didn't drive around looking at damaged cars. I would occasionally track down damaged cars as part of investigations, but I wasn't on the appraiser side. But, I really started as an adjuster, front lines, dealing with customers, dealing with claims, and I later specialized in large loss homeowner property claims. I was one of the first few specialists at Amica. Most adjusters back in that day were both auto and home adjusters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I became one of the first few specialists in property. I moved out to Southern California for a few years as a supervisor. Growing up here in the Northeast, this was where all my family was from. And this was at a time in my life when a lot of my friends were getting married. So it seemed like every other week I was taking a cross-country trip back home for a wedding or other family event. So when the opportunity came up to move back to home office as more of a supervisor at that point, but really on the technology side and overseeing some projects, I jumped at the opportunity. And there I worked in the property loss division. I oversaw some deployments. One of our the first computerized estimating programs. Remember the days of Marshall Swift Beck?
Absolutely.
I do. Were you guys an MSB shop?
We were early on, yeah. It was funny. During that role, my boss gave me the nickname Kostecki. Remember Com Central?
Yeah.
I earned the nickname Kostecki, and that took me quite a few years to burn that nickname off. But, being involved in the deployment of that and teaching adjusters how to estimate was a really great use of my skills in understanding construction, working with customers and contractors, and working with software, to kind of figure all that out. So it was really an interesting role for me. And that turned into property claims examiner, where I oversaw a territory of large and complex claims, I think across 11 different states. So, where, being a frontlines adjuster, maybe 1 out of 100 claims that you have is interesting or crazy or very complicated. In that role as an examiner, like 100 out of 100 claims is messy.
Oh,
so, some really great experiences there, a lot of experience with litigation and, just large property claims.
I just want to jump in here because that's a job that probably suited you perfectly, because you're the kind of guy who likes to look at a big, hairy, audacious, complicated task and figure out, where do I start? What are the steps? What's the finished product look like? And that probably suited you very well.
I enjoyed it. It was interesting. When I first started, we were still in the world of paper files. So you'd come to work, you'd have a big pile of files on your desk. At the end of the day, you hope that pile was shorter than when you started. But yeah, looking through files, looking at estimates, identifying opportunities to be more accurate in the ways that our adjusters are handling files certainly was a good use of those skills. I enjoyed it for a bit, but I think the people side of it was really different. While certainly I worked with branch managers and some adjusters, you were more managing files than managing people.
Right.
And at the same time, I was also taking a leading role in some key technology initiatives, one of which at that time was deploying a web-based mapping system.
Oh, yeah.
Leveraging technology to predict where claims might happen after an event. And through that, I think working on technology projects really helped energize me. And, with that prior knowledge in property claims and leveraging technology to improve processes, that's where really we started the claims-focused innovation team.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was that?
I think we launched that team in 2013, 2014.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty early.
We were focused on things like drones and mobile apps, leveraging technology to make our adjusters more efficient out in the field. And one of the things we looked at there, smart home technology, was a really interesting area. I think I talked about that the last time.
Was that back in 2013? You were talking about the drones and smart technology and things like that?
Yeah, I think I installed one of my first leak detection devices in about 2013 in the house here. So, yeah, I would say that's really when we first became aware of it. We continued to do some deep research, and then it wasn't until about 2018 when we really were going to embrace that trend. We built an enterprise innovation team around smart home technology as kind of our first primary project.
Yeah.
That team eventually scaled up. We built out a core innovation team and an adjacent innovation team, took more of a portfolio approach to innovation.
What's that mean? Portfolio
it just means,
approach.
You can't really start an innovation team with one project. The whole idea about innovation is you're working on a number of different things, and most of them should fail. They should be so ambitious that you should be starting projects that will fail. So if you just have one project, you're more of like an implementation team as opposed to an innovation team.
Did you bring in a professional innovation person to put this thing together, or did you kind of build it from the ground up and say, okay, well, I'm Adam Kostecki. I'm going to buy a manual and read it, and then we'll go from there?
It was a mixture. We had some good talent within Amica that was the foundation for our team. We did involve outside help consultants really to help us understand how to structure for innovation and what were some key roles to build out on the innovation team. And then later on, we certainly went out there and hired specific talent for some of those key roles because it just didn't exist inside the organization.
So what does it take to be on that team? Whenever you were looking to add to that team, what kind of skill sets does somebody need to be on a team like that?
It varies based on the roles, and the roles can be quite different, from an innovation manager to an innovation analyst to a strategic designer, very different. But I would say one key competency that's important across all those roles is dealing with ambiguity. Working in an innovation team, the career path is not a straight line. It's not like the rest of the career lattice in the organization where you go from one role to the other. And ultimately, in some of the roles in innovation, you really need deep experience. Like when it comes to things like customer research, you really need deep experience, people that are willing and experts in research that are willing to really go deep there instead of taking someone in that role and promoting them to manager or, supervisor. That's not really the career path. They want to go deeper in research and be craftsmen in their trade of doing research. So hiring for that skill and creating a career path for that skill is definitely different than the rest of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But you ran it.
Yes, I did.
You didn't come from an innovation team elsewhere. You kind of had a couple of innovation things in your innovation tool belt. I'm trying to put these in terms that you'll appreciate.
Tool belt.
See how I'm playing to my guest here, Lee?
That was really good, Rob.
Thank you.
Podcast 101.
But you ran it. So, how did you get there?
I think as with any good innovation, you learn by doing, right? You have a good idea from a strategy perspective of where you want to go. But then you get the right people that are equally motivated, the right skill set. I had a great management team that help with some of the day-to-day. One of the things about me is I'll give you a whole bunch of great ideas, but sometimes when it comes to execution, that's where sometimes you need a little bit more support, and you need a varied set of people to help. You can't have all of the same people, especially in innovation. You really need a diverse set of skills that are working together collectively, and skills that can be complementary. One of the things I always thought from a leadership perspective, often the approach to leadership is to think about people's weaknesses and to try and build upon their weaknesses so they're, equal with everybody else. And really my focus was to understand people's strengths and to make them stronger in those specific areas.
You weren't looking for them to be broad. You were looking for them to be deep.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And then wanted them to go deeper and wanted to help them go deeper as opposed to broadening out in some cases. Because, one of the things someone said to me early on in my career was, Adam, sometimes you're a square peg trying to go into a round hole. You need to round off those edges. And I always thought to myself, but what if those edges are what makes me good at what I do?
Yeah. You could write a whole book on that.
That's a whole interesting topic right there, that maybe we can do that in another episode. But I want to stay here on innovation teams. We see across the industry now many carriers with innovation teams.
Most carriers.
Yeah. And whether it's for lack of better terms, a lip service innovation team, or an innovation team that's really empowered to lead change, because that's what it does ultimately, right?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is the innovation theater, right? And in some cases, teams are more interested in the activities as opposed to the impact. But I think innovation really is all about the impact. It's not just about coming up with the idea, but driving that change all the way through deployments and implementations, and to monitoring after the fact, to measuring the level of impact you're achieving. That's what true innovation is.
So you build this innovation team, and through it, you gain tremendous exposure, not only to the process and the principles, but also to products, and what products are pertinent and what matters to the carrier. Talk about some of the things you learned in what you did.
Yeah, we certainly spent a lot of time scouting outside of Amica and looking at new capabilities, startups with new products, new service offerings. And often we were in a position to try and integrate those new offerings into our existing products. So whether it's a smartphone app that can measure how you drive, we did a lot of testing on the innovation team of the different usage-based insurance, or UBI apps out there. Learned a lot about that technology. Or whether it's a piece of hardware like a leak detection device, or a device that can detect and stop a leak from happening. Learned a lot about what it means to have a piece of hardware involved in the insurance process. I think a lot of these, a lot of things that we tried out and that we tested failed. And I think they failed by virtue of this idea that if you're not out there and you're not ambitious enough and you're not trying out a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't work, then maybe you're not learning as much as you should. Mm-hmm. If innovation teams have a very high success rate, one of the things you might think about is maybe the projects are too incremental. They're too close to the core. I think one of the key metrics to measure innovation progress is those failures. And what did you learn from the failures?
I like that a lot.
Talk about IoT for a second. I know that was a hot topic for you in the past several years. Why?
I think our initial fascination with IoT, especially with my background in claims, was really around how to leverage these devices to prevent losses from happening. And there are a lot of great solutions out there, but the more that we tested, the more we understood that IoT, when it comes to loss mitigation, it's not all about the sensor. The sensor plays a big role, but it goes well beyond the hardware. it goes into behaviors of the people in the homes, and it goes into education. I think loss mitigation goes from a single device into more of a programmatic approach in the future, where things like helping people understand their home maintenance requirements are really important, and being preventative. Some of the testing with those devices, what we found is just getting people to go into areas in their homes that they don't often visit, whether it's beside the washer machine to look at the hoses going into the washing machine, or to look at the hot water heater, or even just under sinks in bathrooms or kitchens. That awareness turned some people on to issues that they could stop before the claims happened.
Yeah. Wouldn't you say the hardest part about IoT in the insurance space is people? I mean, it's not necessarily the device. It's doing what it's supposed to. It's the people not willing to plug it in, or not willing to set it where it needs to go. What did you learn about that?
Yeah, I think people it's a big part of it. I think some companies have done a great job getting over that through the programmatic approach and making sure that people install devices and follow up as part of the deployment plan. I mean, if you're just firing off free devices and hoping people install them, I think ultimately you see some pretty low install rates.
You would have to.
Yeah, if it's part of a program or a process, and there are touch points in the middle where you're following up with customers, I think you can drive pretty good success on installation. I would say when it comes to IoT and devices, I would say the biggest issue is probably variability, right? The homes are so different out there from a construction perspective. Wireless networks, granted, things have gotten pretty easy to install on Wi-Fi these days, but just different Wi-Fi connections, status, different phones,
passwords,
user IDs, things
that's
like
the
that.
hardest part.
Yeah. Especially once you have a bunch of these on your phone, trying to remember your ID and password for 15 different apps.
Forget it.
It can be a challenge.
Yeah, that's a tough part.
Moving forward to InsurTech Innovations, can you share with us what you're going to be doing? I mean, you must have very specific areas of expertise that you've been able to really gain and polish through all of your exposure here. And not just on the technical side, on the device or the program side, but also on the implementation side, the go-to-market, if you will, side. Is that right? Talk about what you're thinking. How do you take what you have and move it into where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying before, working with a lot of vendors, we learned a lot about what doesn't work. And, we learned a lot about throughout those trials about those failures. And in many cases, it just involved a different tweak or a different pitch, right? Being clear about what the value proposition is and what problem a solution is potentially solving, and helping insurers quantify that opportunity so that priorities can be brought to that. That just goes to kind of the high level strategy, the pitch and the go-to-market strategy for some of these offerings. I think just helping startups understand how to pitch, and again, how to present and who to present to. That's another key area that I can help these newer companies with.
I'm sure that's a big mistake that a lot of companies make.
Oh yeah, the startups, they're always trying to go right to like the chief claims officer or the CEO. Like those that's not the right target for most of these. You got to find the people that are experiencing directly the problems that you solve, and they'll help you find the right people. They'll make the right connections.
So kind of create a champion to help you.
Right. You got to find someone that's feeling the pain and says, wow, this really is a solution that could help. And certainly, innovation teams are good places to start because they have all those connections. They can make those introductions. Those folks from the business can help vet ideas and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, throughout that, certainly just high level go-to-market strategy. Our team did a lot of customer research. Through that, we learned things like prototyping and validating ideas before you get too deep.
Yeah.
Some startups I think could benefit from understanding how to do that and ways to do that inexpensively and pretty quickly. Certainly just overall product development, starting with, a key opportunity to address, quantifying that opportunity, and then making sure that from a product perspective, you're actually solving that problem in an effective way.
Yeah.
And then just in specific areas of expertise, the types of platforms or technologies that or companies I work with. I mentioned my experience in claims, property side especially. I've got some deep experience in property estimatics and, deploying direct repair programs or contractor networks. So I've got a few prospective clients in that area. I mentioned my work in the geospatial and mapping technology. There's a lot. It's really interesting to see what's happening with the aerial imagery, the new imagery coming off of the some of these SAR satellites, synthetic aperture radar, that can see through darkness and through clouds and measure millimeter level change detection. Really interesting applications on a geospatial perspective.
Yeah, it's very. To help me understand, I just want to make sure I'm right. So InsurTech Innovations comes in to the marketplace and you help get these companies together. You help implement. Who is your customer? Is it the startup and you help them go out to market and implement? Or is it the carrier and you help them implement a solution? Who is your customer?
Primarily, I'm starting more on the vendor side, but definitely I think carriers of different sizes. I mean, some of the early and younger carriers, I think, could benefit from some of the experience I've gained, whether it be, in claims directly or building out innovation teams.
I absolutely think that a carrier could contract with InsurTech Innovations and as an advisor of how to build a team, right? To work with the team. Because, I mean, my God, you've tripped and fallen.
Sure.
Right? One of the things that I always used to say, I still believe it very strongly, and that is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So much of our time is wasted in life, reinventing a wheel that already exists. We just have to find who invented it and go to them and get that wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly help accelerate for carriers looking to build out innovation teams that don't have a lot of experience in this area, especially as it relates to the AM Best scoring criteria and understanding that, how to achieve good results there. Certainly have some great experiences there that could be helpful.
What are some of the pitfalls that some of these startups have? What are some of the things that you see just out of the gate that companies could use that would help them?
I mean, one of the things I often hear from startups is they want more introductions or they need help from a sales perspective. Really, once you start getting into it, what you find is the reason they're not getting calls back is because their pitches don't make sense or they don't have a product that's really ready to sell.
Right.
And, that's the worst thing you want to do in that case is get more introductions to people. Because as with many things in life, sometimes you only get one chance. Mm-hmm, and if you don't have a refined pitch and you don't have a product or a turnkey product that you can immediately set up a pilot and start testing, the last thing you need is more introductions at that point. So I think making sure you have an offering that's ready for market before you really dump the gasoline on it through leads and introductions, I think is a key thing. Secondarily, I mean, I think making sure you're solving a valuable enough problem. There are a lot of these niche solutions out there, either from a customer experience side or from an IoT device side that solve an interesting problem, but that problem just isn't frequent enough.
Or big enough.
Yeah.
Narrowness is an issue. What excites you when you think about the impact that you can make working with an organization?
On the startup side, what excites me about working more with startups is the speed at which they can move and the speed at which they can pivot. Sometimes when a startup just doesn't quite have that right pitch or the product maybe just needs a little bit of a tweak, it can make all the difference in the world. And sometimes it's just a minor tweak. It doesn't require a significant development effort or a complete retooling. It just needs a little bit of sharpening. So I think on the startup side, I'm excited about making progress a lot quicker. And, I think on the carrier side, I think I'm excited about helping them understand some key future trends that they can prepare for in the future from not necessarily from like a project implementation perspective, But from like a high level trend perspective, I've got some training in identifying patterns and trends from a futurist perspective, and some of the things happening. This is a really exciting time.
I mean, isn't that a lot of what innovation is about? And I don't care whether you're making innovation or creating innovation or whatever it is that you're doing with it, is reading the tea leaves of the future.
I would say that's maybe a misconception about innovation, is that it's all about reading the tea leaves. I think that's an important component of innovation, but there's so much value in understanding the business today and understanding technology and understanding the key drivers and levers that need to be adjusted, that there's this tremendous amount of value that can be brought to organizations through incremental innovation. But, I think really where the future scanning is important, it's when you're trying to come up with the breakthroughs or address the adjacent markets and the adjacent opportunities. Pattern matching and trying to predict out where things are going with electric vehicles or where things are going with the metaverse, or in some cases, maybe a little closer to us, connected home. I think that's where it becomes more important. But on the incremental innovation side, I would say, like, just understanding the business is probably more important than, the futurist type training.
I like that. I mean, are there trends that people are not looking at that they should be looking at? Are there carriers out there who think that they've got it going, but there's this whole new world that they're not even thinking about? Take, electric cars, for example, or take, I don't know, that's a great one. Like, is there something out there that people should be looking at?
I can't speak to, the carriers out there, but, I can speak to just what needs to happen to support this move to electric vehicles. Okay. And I can also speak to, what might be happening today that maybe people aren't noticing as much because these EVs represent such a small share of the current book of insurance. When it comes to electric vehicles, one of the things the industry is starting to see is the cost to repair these vehicles after an accident in many cases is significantly more than the cost to repair an internal combustion or an ICE vehicle. And I think that's something, everyone's aware of right now. But the question becomes, or there's a couple questions, why is that the case? And maybe more importantly, what do we do about it moving forward?
Right.
Let's talk about EVs. That's really cool. I live in California.
I'm sorry.
They just passed legislation. And don't quote me on the year, but by 2035, the only new cars that are going to be sold here are electric by law. Now, we'll see what happens in 2035. Yep. It's not a magic wand that's going to make it happen, or a law that's going to make it happen. But nonetheless, let's just assume for a second, if nothing else, it's a validation of a trend. And I mean, I know people who, regardless of their political stance or their climate stance or anything, they would have an electric car for cost, for sound, for safety.
Just to be able to use the HOV lane in California, right?
Just to be able to. No, the HOV2 lane, which is where you have to have 3 people or more, not just 2.
Look at that.
So there you go. They're here to stay. It's a super big deal.
You mentioned like a law isn't necessarily going to change things. In and of itself, I would agree with that. But I think public policy plays a significant role in driving this trend in the future. And, when you look at other countries that have been successful with deploying EVs, countries like Norway, the incentives that they provide, not just on the cost of the vehicle when you first buy it, but on things like your ongoing excise tax. Or I think they have some sort of law out there that says any road toll or ferry toll for an electric vehicle is 50% the cost of a gas toll.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
So, those incentives go a lot deeper.
They do.
I think they also go into, countries like Norway have much more clean energy already. So right. It's hydroelectric, wind power. It's already clean energy that's powering these electric vehicle fleets. Whereas other countries maybe aren't starting from that same position. But I think government incentives play a huge role in adopting. And, California is one example of states that have announced legislation to try and go electric by 2035.
Yeah.
I think, across the whole country, they're trying to make that same mandate of 2035. And there have been at least a handful of others that have made similar commitments.
But the ramifications on the insurance industry have got to be very significant.
Yeah. I mean, you might just think about if you try and think about the cost to repair an electric vehicle as an increment over the cost to repair an internal combustion engine, that's where I think there's not as strong a correlation. I think you're dealing with a totally different risk, and that's one of the questions the industry has to wrestle with right at this point is how do electric vehicles actually change the nature of the risk?
Right. I don't even know if I don't even know how much it is to fix an electric over a gas.
There are some statistics. There's been some early research by companies like CCC. I think they've published some of this research. Depending on the category or the class of vehicles, I think one that stood out just on the top of my head was small SUVs. The pure battery powered small SUVs cost somewhere I don't know. Again, this is off the top of my head, maybe 50% higher after a collision to repair a small SUV as it does to repair the ICE counterpart.
Is that scale, though? Is some of that scale?
A symptom of this, or part of the problem here, is that, the supply and demand economics going into pricing. There's not enough mechanics that can fix EVs. The bodywork on many of them is aluminum, which requires specialty skills to weld and repair. They sometimes come with these exotic paint colors that are 4 or 5 stage colors in order to repaint. So I think you're dealing with a much smaller number of shops that are qualified to fix these vehicles. And then just when you get into the supply chain around parts, an interesting thing about EVs is there really isn't much of an aftermarket right now.
Right.
One of the ways carriers control costs on ICE vehicles after a collision is through the use of non-OEM parts.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really much of an option when it comes to EVs.
So then the EV manufacturers have a important role in this.
Yeah, I think in the future, once we really get through some of these issues, I think the OEM manufacturers for electric vehicles are positioned very well to consider their own branded insurance.
Yeah,
a la Tesla.
Yeah, I think you look at what Tesla is doing, and I think it's a great example in market of what can be done.
We've had several companies on talk about telematics, talk about driving data, talk about accumulating driving data, talk about using driving data for UBI, using driving data for mitigation, all different kinds of things. Talk about that next step.
I think where we are right now is we're in the messy middle where things haven't been ironed out. And by the way, this trend isn't going to happen overnight. Right? This move to electric vehicles is going to take time, probably in the 5 to 10 year time frame when these impacts really become pronounced. You can really start seeing some of these impacts. But right now we're in the messy middle. We're just starting to see some of these issues. And, again, there are so many complexities. I'm not as a CEO of an auto insurance company. I think I should be aware and concerned about autonomous, but I think when it comes to EVs, there's so much more complexity than just autonomous driving. And, the performance of these cars, a $160,000 Tesla can outperform a $3 million supercar. And what does that mean to the risk, right? And how do you charge the right premium for that? When it comes to weight, these vehicles, the Hummer H2 almost weighs 10,000 pounds. What is that going to mean when that hits another vehicle from a property damage perspective?
Right.
These electric vehicles, they're silent. So, the people not paying attention, walking around with their heads buried in their cell phones, they don't even hear these things coming and they step right in front of them. The other thing, the complexity of hardware, when it comes to these EVs, in many cases, the hardware is the same, but they're flashed with different variations of software that either provide different capabilities. The example of the Tesla autonomous driving capability, that's a software update that you pay a monthly fee for. But it's the same hardware. So how do you tell which vehicles have that on them or not, and which months the feature is turned on or off? In general, an electric vehicle produces a lot more data about the risk than an ICE vehicle. That's where some of these OEMs may be able to capitalize on this in the future. It's a pretty interesting spot we're in right now where companies like Tesla know more about how people drive their cars than the insurance companies that insure them.
Adam, we are so honored to have you, but we are up against the clock. And so let's do part 2 here. Let's do part 2 with you. You're a very unusual person in our industry, right? And I think that you have tremendous value because of the time you've spent on the carrier side, because of the jobs that you've done, and your remarkable insight into the products that are out there. And so I'm just so excited to share all that with our audience. And I know that our audience is super excited to hear about it.
Absolutely.
And so will you come back for a second episode?
Absolutely. We got to finish this conversation here, you know?
So listen, thank you for today. How does somebody get in touch with you?
Reach out to me via email, adam@InsurTechInnovations.com.
That's easy enough.
And it's an InsurTech without the E, InsurTech.
Oh, that's important. That's important.
Look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay, look him up on LinkedIn. Kostecki.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate this. Lee, it was great to see you again. I look forward to the next one.
That's right. I like that.
I'm in.
All right.
Thank you. One of my favorite people in the insurance industry.
Yes, he is he is one of the first people in the InsurTech space you had me meet whenever I came to work at 470 back then.
And what did you, that's right.
You said, you have to spend time with Adam. And you gave me his number and you said, call him. And I said, I'm not just going to call him, Rob. And you said, you listen to me, you call him. And I talked to Adam in my office for an hour just about the space. And it really set the tone for my whole InsurTech career. He was a great guy. He was a great guy.
He's an innovation pioneer. I mean, the innovation space is young in its formal and current state, and Adam is a pioneer.
He's a pioneer.
And it's pretty funny when you're, whatever age he is, young man and a pioneer, but he is. And he's going to do amazing things. And the biggest problem that Adam is going to have is he's not going to have enough time because he's going to be so crazy in demand.
He's already in demand. I mean, people are, they know, and they're like, you're doing what? Yeah, let's work together.
In fact, I'll tell you what, the conference I was just at, I was just at Property Information Report. People were talking about him.
Really?
Yeah. In a couple different conversations, I told them, I have an innovation guy much, much cheaper than Adam. Because I was trying to sell you, because I figured, if I could sell you to do some innovation work, I could make a little on the side. Right?
Yeah. Adam's got a great future. Very excited. Happy that he came on. Can't wait to talk to him again.
100%. Big thank you. Large, grande thank you to Adam Kostecki, to each of you for listening, to my co-host and co-founder of this podcast, Lee Boyd, and to our intrepid producers. I say thank you. And until next time, we'll say
goodbye, everybody.